What's up guys, I'm Bob Tompkins with the Living in SC team at Real Broker, and welcome back to the channel. On today's episode of Living in SC, we're going to be talking about the top 5 most common mistakes that people make when moving to Greenville, South Carolina. Now, you're going to want to stick around to mistake number 5 because I think it's one of the most crucial mistakes, but also one of the most easily avoidable. But before we get into it, if you're thinking about making a move to the Greenville, South Carolina area, our team would absolutely love to help you. Give us a call at the number listed below or an email at info@livinginsc.com, and we would love to connect with you. Now, without any further ado, let's get right into these most common mistakes. Our first most common mistake that people make when moving to the area is they don't get to know what their commute looks like around the upstate. Now, depending on where you decide to move in the upstate of South Carolina, your commute is going to look a lot different. Now, I think a lot of people will look at Greenville on a map. They'll kind of see how everything is situated. Maybe they'll punch in some times on Google Maps to see how far it takes to get from one place to another. And they don't really understand how the upstate is laid out because on a map, it doesn't look like it's that big. It doesn't look like it's that spread apart. But where you're situated in the upstate can greatly impact how easy it is to get from one place to another. Now, if you're looking at a map of the upstate of South Carolina, you'll notice that Interstate 85 runs kind of diagonally across the upstate, and then you have Interstate 385 that kind of comes up from the south and comes into I-85. The I-85 corridor is a huge thing for the upstate, and it does greatly help mobility around the upstate, but where you are off of it can greatly impact your commute times. We see very commonly that people want to be in areas like Greer or Travelers Rest, but if you're in Greer proper or maybe a little north of Greer, or you're in Travelers Rest, you don't have the same easy access down to the interstate. So if you're having to make a commute over to, let's say, Simpsonville or Anderson or Powdersville, these areas aren't super easy to maneuver from because they're off of that I-85 corridor. That being said, getting into downtown Greenville can look a little different depending on where you're at. A lot of people will choose to move to the Simpsonville area as opposed to the Greer-Pelham area because of the interstate traffic into downtown Greenville if they're having to make that commute. A lot of that is because I-385 tends to have a much better flow of traffic into downtown than I-85 does coming down from Pelham over to Woodruff Road. So if you're having to make that commute in, you still have to connect to 385 if you're coming down from Pelham, but you're likely gonna run into a lot of traffic backups. Now, compared to other parts of the country, our commutes are not very bad, but these little things can become a nuisance, especially when you realize that there could have been a better option for you that does have an easier commute. So understanding where you need to be and what's important to your lifestyle is going to be critical in choosing that place that you want to be so that you can avoid some of the more annoying commutes in the upstate. The second mistake that we see a lot of people make is not understanding the challenges that may exist when moving from another state to South Carolina. Whenever you're moving from one state to another, it's always important to understand that state laws, taxes, the way different things work can always look a little bit different. And one of the biggest ways that it looks different here in South Carolina is the way our property tax works. In some states, there may be a flat property tax based on whatever it's been valued at, and in other states, there may be levels to your property taxes. And in South Carolina, your property tax can look a little bit different if it's your primary residence versus if it's a secondary residence or if you're using it as an investment property. So one of those mistakes that we see people make is they move here, even if we have conversations about it, maybe they forget, they purchase a property and they never go and change their effective tax rate. Whenever property is purchased in South Carolina, the state defaults a tax rate to what we call our 6% tax rate. If it's a primary residence, you're able to get that adjusted from 6% down to 4%. And while 2% may not seem like a huge difference, your property tax actually ends up being 2.5 to 3 times higher if you're at that 6% tax rate as opposed to your primary residence tax rate. So little things like this when you're moving from another state to South Carolina are important to consider when you're making that move. The third mistake that we see people make when they're moving is they don't visit before they come here. Greenville is one of those towns that is blowing up. We're one of the fastest growing towns in the United States. And as a result, there's a lot of people that want to move here. But one of the common mistakes that we see is they do a little bit of research online, they watch some of maybe our videos, they get sold on the area, and then they just decide to move here sight unseen. And that can pose several problems for people. One of the biggest things is that the upstate and surrounding areas around Greenville are made up of a bunch of different little communities. And when you come out here and visit, it gives you the opportunity to see what each of those communities looks and feels like, what the different downtown vibes are, how the neighborhoods are structured around these communities. And a lot of times we see people, based on their personality or their lifestyle, end up falling in love with one or two very specific communities instead of just Greenville as a whole. So if you're considering a move to the Greenville area, we highly recommend that you come out here and visit first, because all of these communities around Greenville, they all look a little bit different. The fourth mistake that we see people make is that they fail to consider some of the climate differences that may exist from where they're moving. A lot of people think just because we're down south that South Carolina is going to be warm and hot all of the time. Now, our summers, that is definitely true. The summers in South Carolina are not that pleasant. They can be humid, they can be hot. However, the upstate does have some of the cooler temperatures if you look across the state and our summer averages. That being said, it is still gonna be commonplace to have temperatures in the 90s and humidity that's through the roof. So summers can be a little unbearable depending on where you're coming from and what you're used to. But the most common mistake that we see people make is they just assume that winters are not that cold. And in South Carolina, our winters actually are a little bit cold. In fact, it's very important to consider that Greenville is just south of the Appalachian Trail, the Appalachian Mountains. So we actually are at a place where you're starting to get a little bit of elevation and you can have that cool air come down off of the mountains. In fact, it's not uncommon to see freezing temperatures and below. Normally we will have several ice storms within a winter, and it's not uncommon to see 1 or 2 snowfalls during the winter months. So if you're moving from a colder region, maybe don't throw out all your winter jackets quite yet. You'll probably still make good use of a couple of them. Now, coming in with our final mistake that people make before they move here is, we've kind of touched on it a little bit earlier in this video, but it's that people don't do their research on the different communities that exist around Greenville. A lot of times we hear, oh, I want to live downtown Greenville, or I want to be in walking distance of downtown Greenville. And the truth is that getting in a walking distance of Greenville is very, very difficult to find. Number one, there's not a ton of homes that are in walking distance of downtown Greenville. Number two, the people that own those homes aren't really selling them very often. And number three, it is very expensive when those properties become available. All of that considered, there are a lot of other communities around Greenville, and those communities offer a lot to their residences. And as I stated before, depending on your lifestyle or your personality, there are going to be communities in the upstate of South Carolina that really fit who you are and where you're at in your life. Now, there's a lot of good places that you can go online to try and do some research. I know a lot of people like niche.com. And some of the different websites like that, where you can go and do some research on the communities. But we always find having a conversation about what communities are best for you is typically the best way to go. So our team would absolutely love to have a conversation with you. We're always open to setting you up with someone on our team to just kind of see where you're at and what may be most important to you, so we can help you find that community that is the best fit for you. So if that's something that interests you, don't hesitate to shoot us an email at info@livinginsc.com or give us a call at the number listed below, as we'd love to connect you and help you explore what community might be best for you in the upstate of South Carolina. Now, once again, I'm Bob Tompkins with the Living in SC team at Real Broker. I hope this video has been helpful to you if you're considering a move to the upstate. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, check out some of our other videos, and we'll see you next time on Living in South Carolina.